Hey y'all, so I had all this packing paper that I crunched up into little bowls, and I'm going to spread them back out, and going to use them to make some journal covers. And I have a ton of this stuff, guys, which is fine because I'm pretty sure I have a lot of these covers to make. I had some old road atlases that I took the pages out of, and I folded them in half and glued them together. And then I started taking those packing paper sheets and gluing that down onto the map pages. Now I need to glue all the edges, and I'm going to glue the corners first because it's just easier with this thin packing paper. I tend to use Eileen's tacky glue for just about everything. So I'm just adding glue to the corner and then kind of aiming for a 90-degree square there. That's how I judge it. I can't judge it by the angle on the edge. So I try for making a 90-degree square on each corner. Glue each corner down, let it dry for a second. Now when you're gluing this packing paper, especially after it's been crunched up, it will tend to try to fold and crease on you. It will soak up glue very, very quickly and almost kind of melt. Like I said, almost everything. I do have a decoupage mix that I make. There's lots of decoupage mix recipes available online. I use Eileen's tacky glue and water, and I just guesstimate my thickness. I don't do like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio or anything like that. I just guesstimate the thickness that I like to use, that I know sticks in my area. And that's the thing, if you live in a humid area, your glue is going to act different than my glue where I live in Texas. So kind of judge your glue mix. If it's not working correctly, it's not sticking good, or it's too wet, it's too dry, you may have to change your recipe for your area and your weather. Sometimes when rainy days, things take longer to dry. Glue stays wet longer. So maybe on rainy days, add a little bit of extra glue to your mixture. On dry days in the middle of summer, add more water. And you could see how quickly this paper starts wrinkling. It's pretty thin, cheap packing paper. It's the kind that's perforated in sheets. So I'm using a shop towel to help me press that down. So you see, if I point the corners first on each side and then kind of work the rest of it in, it's better. And if I use a shop towel, my hands don't get covered in glue and I don't start sticking to everything. Okay, this is where we are now. Feels nice. Here's one where I use 2 separate pieces, scraps, and I'm going to put something down the center of the spine, so I'm not worried about that. As you can see, I've done several. You can see the texture in there. Okay, now for the inking. I'm going to use gathered twigs Distress Oxide to begin with, and I am going to be speeding up several parts of this video because it's just me inking, but I wanted to show the different colors that I use and how each color adds to the look of the journal. Okay, so that's the first layer. Now I'm going to add some ground espresso distress oxide as the next layer. It's my preference to keep the edges and the corners dark on these kind of journals. You can put your darker spots wherever you would like to. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using lighter colors first, and then I'll move through some darker colors, and then I'll go back and highlight with another lighter color. The reason why I was wiping the cover down is because I was getting the little fluff that's sometimes left from using the sponges and the ink brushes. You'll get a little fluff, and I wanted to make sure to get that off. Use a light touch if you're going to rub your journals down so that you don't pull too much of the ink you just spent all this time putting on. Some black soot distress oxide, and I'm going to use this a little bit sparingly. It's going to look like I'm using a lot. I am not. When I go across the larger sections of the journal, I am just barely touching some of the edges. A few places I do a little bit darker, but for the most part, I am barely touching the edges of where that paper is wrinkled. Now I'm going to take some matte gel medium, and I'm going to seal these covers, and this is where the magic happens. This is when you will see the colors that you have put into this project start to change, and it's actually a really, really cool look when you get done with it. I'm going to work from the center out to keep my edges dark. These inks are reactive to moisture and water, so when I say work from the middle out to keep the edges darker, I just don't want to wet the edges so much and brush them so much that I'm pulling them in and losing that deeper color because I've moved them too much. So I'm working the middle, and I'm going to pick it up and do the edges and the corners so that I can make sure that those are sealed. Also, I took the matte medium out of the jar to use it instead of dipping my brush in there so that the inks didn't leach into my matte medium. And now this is what it looks like when they're dry. And see how it pulled the colors? These came out really nice, I think. Aged leather from packing paper. Very nice. I'm going to work on the inside of the cover now. I've already done a few of these. The way I did that was I took some cardstock that I wasn't exactly happy with and some coffee dyed paper, and I glued those two sheets together. And then I cut them down to fit the inside of the cover. I'll show you, I leave an eighth of an inch on each side and an eighth of an inch on the top and bottom. So these measured 10.5. So I cut 10.5 wide. So I cut my inside covers 10.25 wide. And then I inked around them with some Distress Oxides, the lighter colors that I used on the covers themselves. That one would be Vintage Photo. And then I think I ended up coming back and adding some gathered twigs, both in the Distress Oxide inks. Now I'm going to score the inside of the cover. These are pretty thick covers. I'm going to find the center first and score there. I'm using that ruler to help me hold my line and using it as a guide because the covers are so thick and textured. I don't want to mess up and then have to come back and figure out how to cover up my mistake. So I just use the edge of the ruler. As a side note, these rulers are about 25 cents a piece. They're the thin wooden rulers, about 25 cents a piece when school supplies come out for the year. And if you look on that left side, I took a sheetrock knife. You could use a craft knife, and I turned that into a tear ruler by just carving out little pieces along the way. Now I'm going to make 3 score lines. The first one's going to be exactly in the center. And then I'm going to go a 1/4 inch to the left of center and make another score line, and 1/4 inch to the right of center and make another score line. This is going to allow for some easement on the spine, especially when you begin to fold it. And also it will allow the journal cover to curve rather than try to crack. It just helps keep that spine intact. No, I'm not going to completely crease this because I'm going to add some fabric to the spine, and I also want to stitch all the way around the journal cover before I complete that creased fold. I tore some black batik 100% cotton into strips about 1.5 inches wide, and that's the fabric that I'm going to use on the outside of the spines. So I'm going to work on getting all this fabric glued down onto the spines, let those dry, and then I'll get them stitched up and be back with another video. Thanks for watching, y'all.